We're here with Gerry Jobe at RauDZ today. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you.
So, tell us, how did you get started? Because you are what I would refer to as a mixology genius, and certainly locally. How did you get to this point?
Started off in the service industry when I was quite young. I wanted nothing to do with bartending. I wanted to serve. I thought that serving was where I would be at. Started serving at restaurants and bussing tables and worked my way up. Worked on Granville Street for quite a few years, sort of earned my stripe as a busboy. They threw me behind the bar as a bar porter. I stayed there for 7 years. I really still didn't want anything to do with bartending, and then eventually I got moved into my own well on Granville Street and started mixing and shaking there. And then sort of took it from there and just always kind of wanted to do things from scratch and make homemade ingredients with cocktails, and people looked at me funny like, what are you doing? Why are you using fruit? Why are you using spices and herbs? And this is back in the early 90s when that kind of thing was unheard of. Everyone was using sticky sweet liqueurs, and I was making my own sort of reductions and stuff and bringing homemade stuff to competition. So that's the sort of roots of it there.
So the way that you mix your drinks is quite creative, and everything starts from something. So can you walk us through a process for how you develop a drink?
Sure. Well, I'm really interested in my sort of forte or niche has been high concept cocktails. So taking an album or a picture, a piece of art or music or lyrics, things that I'm inspired by. I'm a pop culture sponge, so I sort of start there with the seed of an idea. For instance, just give me a favorite movie.
Oh, a favorite movie of mine